Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, hey, hopefully you are ready for another great show, because in the second part of the program, we will have computer and technology news. A lot of great stories, everything from 5G at the Super Bowl to Cadillac with their Super Cruise and what that's going to be, the Samsung Galaxy S9 getting a new operating system, just the ins and outs, the daily the daily gossip that we try to keep you up to date on, because we really focus on it and we can barely keep up, so we're going to do our best to do that for you. But that's in the second part of the program. In the first part, we are entirely dedicated to our guests and talking about, well, hey, everything that they have to offer, and in this case, it's going to be high-end speakers. If you find yourself to be an audiophile or even not an audiophile, this is this should really catch your attention, because we luckily Computer America had a chance to go out there and actually listen to the speakers in person, and that's going to come up in the program. But I was never really like. Obviously for the show here, we have to have some high-end audio equipment to make sure that everything sounds okay. But I was never really, into the high-end audio. But then I heard this and it kind of clicked, the difference between something that is compressed, something that, is playing on very, very small speakers, sounds kind of tinny. And, don't get me wrong, 90% of the time, perfectly fine. But to hear these things and hear the difference, it's really eye-opening. And to talk about the background of this, how it came to be, what the differences are, and really, everything about this product, Rembrandt Labs. And of course, the president of the company will be joining us here in just a moment. Now, before we do all that, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including a link to our guest website. It will be in the show notes after today. You can go there, and of course, any articles, reviews, any topics, anything that we talk about here today, you can find at computeramerica.com. Just that simple. Or if you'd like to check out our guest as we do the show, Rembrandt, REMBRANDT audio.com. You can check it out there. And these are something that you're definitely going to have to see. They have a very unique design, and really overall, it goes beyond just the looks of it, but obviously the sound of it. So, hey, enough beating around the bush. Let's go ahead and get into this and, really just bring on our guest and get talking here. So, as I said before, president of Rembrandt Labs, Mr. Ray Imblum. He is and he's here to talk to us about, designing these things and, what goes into a world-class speaker. So, Ray, thank you for joining us here on Computer America. How you doing?
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. And as I said before, I actually consider myself to be pretty typical when it comes to, kind of the, well, I would say typical of at least a different generation. I was born in, let's just say 91. But yeah, I grew up with speakers that are getting smaller and smaller, audio files that are getting more compressed. Just everything is just kind of good enough and portable. And it seems like you with Rembrandt Labs have been going the opposite direction with these new speakers that we're going to talk about. So this is going to be kind of new territory for me at least, but I think a good place to start before we get to any of that is a bit of background on Rembrandt Labs. Did you start this specifically for this first product, or where did the company come from, and what is your background? How did you find yourself working with audio?
Okay, so yes, I did start Rembrandt Labs specifically for this speaker. The reason for that is, well, I've been designing audio professionally for a little over 11 years now, and I can get into that more about my background overall. But specifically, I wanted to concentrate on something that someone would bring into their home. They can sit down in their living room, and they can have a real experience with their favorite music. I have a lot of background in the wave theory, physics, and so on of sound, and we can expand on that on my overall career. But I just became totally enamored with something that I had begun to witness, and I wanted, as a personal goal, to give people music that they could really feel. I mean, so that they could emotionally feel their music, to the point where when they played their favorite song, I wanted them to be moved to tears hearing their favorite song, even though they've heard it 100 times before. But this time, somehow, it connects at a deeper level. And I've been studying natural sound fields and things like that for quite a while. And I was developing a theory, and I wanted to take that theory and put it into practice in a product. As you know, I brought the speaker to CES, and to CES 2020, to the Consumer Electronics Show.
Right.
A reviewer came in to CES, gave him a private listening. He listened, had a really good experience, walked out later, and he wrote a review right there at CES. And part of his review, he said, "I found myself emotional, tears in my eyes, deep in thought, totally submerged." And when that happens, I know that I've accomplished what I was trying to do. I mean, I've witnessed this over and over. And that's my reward, to see people react to a theory that became practice. That's my personal reward as an engineer,
Right. So
I've done a lot of things that I've explained to people in the past, and they go, "Oh, well, that's nice," But in audio, I finally found a connection. I mean, I remember the first time that I had designed an audio product, brought it home to my wife. I'd already been doing engineering for 40 years. And I tell her about all these great things I've done. And she goes, "Well, that's nice, dear. Okay." But the first time I played an audio product for her, she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, Ray." You know what I mean? It was like, she something I did, she gets it, so that's what got me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So something that definitely resonates, and I will say that my experience going to the private listening there, and being able to listen, I was of course kind of moving around the room and just kind of checking the quality as best I could. But I got to say that my impression was I personally had never heard music like that. sounded, and I know that you mentioned, kind of lifelike and the whatnot, but like, especially with like, and I don't know how complicated it is, and we're going to get in, kind of all the labor that that you put into this thing, but you made it sound, especially to me, for like the brass instruments and a lot, and the vocals especially, lifelike, I guess, doesn't do it justice. Well, people can say it sounds lifelike, but it sounded like there was a band sitting right there in the room with you. And like I said, I've been dealing with compression, smaller and smaller speakers, earbuds, things like that my whole life. I've had some nice headphones, but all of those are just, kind of so and so. You were definitely able to capture that lifelike sound, and I guess that would be my best segue into what makes your design different. What is, I guess, kind of the secret sauce to what separates your speakers from most other speakers in the way that the industry is going in terms of sound?
Well, one of the things that I did for this development is I interacted with musicians. One of the things that I wanted to do was to get reactions from people on what I was trying to accomplish. So that, for instance, people who hear jazz and they like to, and they go and they hear jazz live. They go to these clubs and they hear jazz live. Okay. Mm-hmm. They complain that when they listen to it on a speaker, the saxophone really doesn't sound like a saxophone. Okay. But with these speakers, they hear the dynamics of the saxophone, whisper quiet to just blaring, because it has real wide dynamic range. When you hear a real horn live, mm-hmm. a horn has a raw edge on the horn that you hear when you're live. You don't want to hear it on speakers where that's softened and filtered out, because it just doesn't, it doesn't give you the same feeling. Okay. So I was trying to reproduce a live performance like you get.
And sorry to step on here a little bit, but a lot of the audio is, and you probably know this better than I do, but a lot of it seems to be kind of compressed, and even like, you don't want things to be, super high and other things to be super low. And it just seems like everything, at some point, just, I don't know if it's like the engineering or if it's the speakers, but everything kind of gets blended together to an even tone. But that's not what I experienced with, your speakers.
See, Ben, what I was playing was not special files, okay? What I used as a source, and I did this on purpose to have people, especially audiophiles, notice, okay, is that these are files I just loaded through the iTunes store. They're just Apple AAC files, and I played them through my iPhone. That was the source. But what they experienced was something beyond what they've heard through that kind of a source before. And that's because of the speaker and the amplifier. That's not because the information wasn't in the source file. Okay. That was because the system didn't take all the information in the source file and be able to reproduce it in the dimension that they need. And that's what I call a natural sound field. Okay, so the key to this is, what do you do with the audio information that you plug into the system? When the system takes it from there through the amplifier, through the electronics, matching the speaker drivers, matching the resonators mm-hmm. that get the most out of those speakers. That's the key to this. Okay, is the equipment itself, not so. That's the sources that people responded to and got emotionally connected with are sources that are not special. They're what people listen to all the time. Yeah, yes, they're not highly compressed MP3 files, but they're just, the normal files you load through iTunes,
No, that's high fidelity audio files are becoming a much more common thing, and I think that a couple services even have those they call it like HD, but yeah, they have like HD streaming that you can do. So the source files are getting better, and you're saying that with
Yeah.
with more of the information already packed into the file, you are then able to take just any file that anyone's listening to and just make it sound better.
Yeah, I can't make it sound, if the information isn't there, I can't reproduce it, okay? But people aren't aware of how much good information is in their existing files if they don't play it through a really good speaker set.
Understand completely. So with So with that being said, let's talk about the actual speakers here, and we're going to call these the Model 5 for anyone out there who's going to try to Google this. Rembrandt Labs Model V, Roman V for 5, and of course we're going to have a link in the show notes and all that over at Computer America. But let's talk about these speakers because there's a lot to these, and I say, for our radio listeners, let's go ahead and talk about the design and just the physical attributes, and then we'll talk about the technology inside. But please describe it for anyone who may just be listening.
Okay. The speakers, the way I designed is I wanted to design them so that everything is a system, let's put it that way. To get a result, all the parts that it takes to get your result, they all have to work with each other. And so to get the most out of the speaker driver, I had to carefully design the resonating cavities of the cabinet. And so the cabinet is a very, very important part of the design. That gets you the best characteristics for the speaker drivers that you use. And you'll notice the speaker cabinet is not square. It's almost like a pyramid. And that's intentional because of the mass that went into the design. There's no parallel walls in those resonating cavities of the design because parallel walls create standing waves. Standing waves create distortion. The front of a speaker is what they call acoustically transparent. So if there's any distortion inside the cabinet, because the standing waves, it comes right out the front, and you hear it, and it takes away from the experience. So I avoided having to deal with Band-Aids to try to cover up standing waves by just not causing them in the first place. Right. Okay. You'll notice that if you take a look at the shape and so on, there are no square panels anywhere in the design. There's nothing square. Everything is tilted and it's a trapezoid. And that's because there's not even any edges of wooden pieces that this thing is put together with that are parallel to each other. And again, capitalizing on my background in vibration theory, that's so when all the energy reflects back from these edges, they don't join at any one point inside of the piece of wood and create a fundamental frequency response. So it's built out of trapezoids. If we go, further into the design, there's a what they call a bass reflex port. Okay, so there's a cavity inside for the woofer, and I have a very long port for the bass reflex port. It goes across the entire width of the front of the cabinet, which is over 17 inches long, and it's a very wide, 6-inch wide throat that's flat, and that's because of something called laminar flow, which means when the air flows in and out of that port, it does it without creating any turbulence, which is distortion. Okay.
Right.
The woofer, there's a cavity inside called a Helmholtz chamber, and that actually crawled up all the way up one side of the cabinet and down the other, so that it was folded. And even though this is a speaker on a stand, I've folded the acoustic features inside of it in such a way that it has the acoustic length of a big floor standing speaker. So when you've heard, the bass response and how it just activates the whole room, and you can feel the bass notes, the low notes. That's because of the way that I did the design of folding something that's normally much bigger into that size.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that, and sorry to interrupt here real quick, but that was one of the design choices that I thought was, kind of different. Was you mentioned, kind of standing speakers, floor speakers. This thing could very easily have been, something larger that would sit on a floor, but you decided to do something that would sit somewhere and either on a counter or its own dedicated spot, and it would play something like that. And you can also talk about the bass, as I understand it, kind of helps the reverb or things like that, but to help isolate it from underneath. But you considered, you decided not to make it a floor stand, but you also decided that you had to control for what it was sitting on so that it wouldn't affect the noise either, correct?
Yeah, actually, technically, you do not want a woofer on the floor. You do not want it to couple with the floor. You don't want it up in a corner so it couples with the ceiling. When you want a realistic bass activation in a room, you want it, 2.5 or 3 feet off the floor. So since I made it a stand speaker, you put it on a stand. Now I have my bass reflex port, so the primary activation for the woofer, at the ideal position in a room. It just drives it that way. The other reason I designed it the way I did is because the audiophiles that are into this hobby, and they just buy these big square black boxes that stand, 4 or 5 feet tall. And when they go to put them in their living room, I think there's something involved called wife acceptance, and this box is attractive. It's not overwhelmingly big, even though it has a big sound. And I've gotten very positive feedback from wives of guys that have bought this thing. Okay, they said, "Hey, this looks pretty nice." They didn't have any problem with it, being in their house. And like I said, since it's on a stand, the woofer port's in the right position and that type of thing. So there's a lot of reasons for the way it is.
Yeah. And of course, if you would like to expand a little, we've described the outside and why it's a stand speaker instead of a floor speaker. So physically, I think we have it covered pretty well. Now we can go ahead and dive into the insides and the way that you accounted for everything, including the fact that you did work for so long on the math for all the acoustics. As you I believe you said before the interview, about 5 months it took you to just kind of in theory work this thing out before you actually moved on to a prototype. Talk about the technology inside and maybe more focus on what's different, of course.
Yeah. So there's 2 patent pendings. One actually is granted. So I have 1 patent granted, and the second one is still pending, and that's on a special multi-chambered resonator inside the speaker cabinet. Behind, there's a large woofer up above, and below it is a full range speaker. Goes from 200 hertz to 20 kilohertz. It uses distributed mode theory, which is a newer physics that's been around for 10 years or so, on how to couple energy into the air. And the reason that I focused in on that and followed it is because it creates a natural sound field. It couples energy into the air the same way that a violin body couples what's happening in the violin to the air around it, so that you hear the tones in the violin. And I used that physics, and I designed a special multi-chambered resonator that uses the energy off the back of the speaker, processes it, and reintroduces it in the front as part of getting the effect that you hear. Okay. And so there's a patent and a patent pending on that technology. The other thing I did specifically by design is that I designed the amplifier circuitry to match the drivers, to give it real wide dynamic range, to give it lots of what they call headroom, to have a very, very stiff power rail that can instantaneously dump 16 amps of current into the drivers when it's needed. But that amplifier is built right into the cabinet. So there's a very short cable connection between the amplifier and the drivers inside. And as you know, when audiophiles go to buy a speaker, first they buy the speaker, and then their challenge is, okay, now I got to buy an amplifier that sounds good with this speaker. And if you talk to audiophiles who are really into it, they will tell you sometimes they buy 3 or 4 different amplifiers before they find one and have used it and listened to it that feel like they're getting out of the speakers what they want to get out of the speakers. And then once they find the right amplifier, then people are going to come and talk to them about, well, do you really have the right cables between the amplifier and the speaker? Because they're like 8 or 12 feet long, and they'll go on and on about, it's this kind of cable instead of that kind of cable. I wanted to build something that when it's delivered, you take it out of the box, you plug it in. Everything was thought through and done already to make it sound good. And within minutes of taking it out of the box, you plugged in your source and you're listening to music. You don't have to go through the, experimenting with different amplifiers and experimenting with different cables and, that type of thing.
Yeah, and of course, just to speak to that a little bit more, I know that you had your smartphone there at the at CES, and you were playing some of your own audio. We were there with another gentleman who was able to just take his phone and just plug it right in. That seemed to be, I guess, the impressive part, because, like you said, you don't need these special cables. It's just really, right now we're talking about smartphones, but if someone wanted to either have let's say a computer or a laptop or any other input, this would work with really almost anything modern, correct?
Right. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, some of the demos there, I was actually streaming, good hi-fi files in and playing them streaming through Wi-Fi. So you've heard things through a bunch of different sources, and they all sounded good, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh no, they. Let's see. Some of my favorite were, of course, the. I don't want to say it wasn't Charlotte's Web. It was like Charlotte. You played one that is just like really focused on the vocals, and again, I use the term lifelike. It was really like there was someone in the room singing to an audience. It was very, very impressive. Speak about the importance of, if you would, how loud these speakers can go, because it's one thing to get really accurate, but if no one can hear it, then what good is it? Talk about how loud these things go, and then of course talk about this idea of distortion, and how you really decided that it can go up to 100 decibels. I think I read here on the site, but then there's 0.1 THD. So talk about all that.
Yeah. So these are not underpowered speakers by any stretch of the imagination. Built in are 300 watt Class D amplifiers, but where they operate is down in the very, very linear region. You get full 100 dB output from these speakers down just in like the 65 watt range. So when you're running a speaker set who has maximum volume at 65 watts, but you're using a 300 watt Class D amplifier, that means whenever there's a percussion on a drum or sharp key on a piano, or that real loud blaring note out of the saxophone in a jazz ensemble, it reaches that with absolutely no problem. It hits the peak it's supposed to hit. It does it without distortion. And that is the key. That's one of the keys to making this believable, because what you would hear if you were there just listening to the live instrument, you're now hearing, because the amplifier and the drivers were designed that way. I mean, I never turned it up to full volume, and the people listening to it, it really, what they call, activated that whole room. You know, the bass notes, the high notes, they were all there.
I'm sure that if you turned it up a bit more, you would have activated, your neighbors' rooms as well. So I'm sure they appreciate that.
Actually, I did have a neighbor come over a couple of times and ask me to turn it down some. So, yeah.
You weren't the only one playing loud music there, but yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was a man who came in that was he was a musician. He played the drums in a jazz ensemble. Okay. And he listened to a piece called Take 5, which is it's historical. It's the piece that actually launched popularity in jazz. And he says, man, when that guy hit the drums, and there is some really hard drums in that, they just really take off and go wild on the drums. He says, I heard everything just like my drums. He says, because that's what musicians like to hear. When they walk in and they can hear their favorite instrument that they play reproduced, they love it. They just love it.
I can definitely understand where a musician and someone who would make music, that would be like nails on a chalkboard if they're like, that's not what it sounds like when I listen to it. So to get that kind of praise, I can see how that would be very flattering. Let's talk about trends in speakers. So obviously, we've been going over some of the amazing work that you've put into these things, and let's talk about kind of where you have deviated from some of the modern trends in speakers. As you know, at CES there was a lot of audio, and really none that tried to do what it is that you're doing, and definitely. It seems like rugged and portable seem to be, like the trends that we're really noticing with a lot of different speakers, maybe not high end, but just general consumer speakers. And actually, and if I could throw one more twist into that as well, I know that audiophiles are very into, I guess, like the classic, like tube amps and like the, the classic speakers from back in the 70s and so on and so forth. So I want you to kind of differentiate what Rembrandt Labs is doing from modern speakers, and then how they also stack up to classic speakers that people have, been tried and true for the past 70 years, but they may be afraid of stepping out of their comfort zone, and if they should. So please.
Okay, sure. Well, some of the things that I see as modern trends that are kind of moving in parallel with what I'm doing is I see more motion recognizing the advantage of built-in amplifiers. There are some high-end products there that you'll see that they have built-in amplifiers. There's more recognition that one of the advantages that has is not only, like I said, matching the amplifier to the drivers, but I don't see as much care taken there as I've been trying to do, especially with very wide dynamic range. But they are recognizing that if they keep the cable connection between the amplifier and the speaker very short, has all kinds of advantages for getting to where you want to go with your speakers. Um, I just don't know if there's enough respect for the importance of what I call very wide dynamic range and very, very low impedance on the power rails, which is some electronic technicians or engineers can kind of relate to that. Sorry
if I could cut in here real quick, but if you could just describe the importance of and this is somewhere where I'm familiar with high dynamic range, which is seen in video and photos and things like that. Wide dynamic range, I'm not as familiar, especially when it comes to audio. Could you explain to that? Just speak to that real quick.
Sure. Let's just take the human voice, for instance. When you're speaking into a microphone and you see that on an oscilloscope, that you can see what the waveforms look like. Okay. The human voice has extremely high peaks, so they would look like very, very high spikes. Okay, and if you take what you call the average energy value, or the RMS, and you drew a line there, that the average energy is much lower than this peak energy. Okay, and if you don't have a system that can reach that peak energy, you're losing content. You're losing realism. You've taken away something that you would hear if it was live. Okay, and that not only is in human speech, but it's with instruments. Like I was saying, a piano. The key, the front end striking of a key on a piano has a very high spike to it, which is extremely necessary if you're going to do realism. A saxophone, okay. There's a number of a drum, okay, a percussion on a drum. That's a really high spike. Okay, so that's called dynamic range. The fact that you can comfortably reach an energy level 10 times higher than normal without distortion, that's dynamic range. And if you don't have that, you're just playing an average energy level, and you're cutting off all those things that happen above a certain energy level. So
you're not getting the fidelity that you would want. So I get that. Okay, thank you.
You're not. You're not getting the fidelity, right?
Right. So, and apologies for cutting you off there, but the second part of the question was, maybe those who are more comfortable with traditional, how speakers used to be. And I know that a lot of people will spend a lot of money on speakers that are, vintage, that are actually from a previous generation. Right. How would you say you stack up compared to those?
Well, what I don't see is enough recognition of the possibilities that technology moves on, not only in electronics, but in the physics of sound. Cone speakers, they were invented in the 1930s, and the design is basically unchanged from the 1930s. When those cone speakers, they move in and out. That's called pistonic. Okay. Then Dr. Klipsch, okay, he came up with a tweeter that uses a horn, uses that shaped horn. But again, that technology has been the same for many, many, many years, 50 years. The distributed mode technology is a valid physics, okay, which I'm using. It actually couples energy into the air in a different way than you get with a cone speaker or a horn. Okay, it uses a flat panel that goes into what they call distributed modes, or multiple simultaneous modes. And like I said, when you analyze it, it is the same way that a violin body couples its energy into the air in different instruments. and even aspects of the human voice. Okay.
Yeah.
If there is an advantage to that physics, someone ought to use it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I'm using newer physics technology to do what I'm doing. Here's a for instance. When you go to a traditional speaker system, there's two of them set up. They're angled, and when you come into a room, they tell you to sit at a specific place they call the sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's the place where these things are focused, and this is where you're supposed to listen. All right. However, when you go to a live performance, there's instruments up on the stage, there's singers up on the stage, but there's no microphones, there's no speakers. The audience is sitting there listening. That is all the sweet spot. They are all hearing what they want to hear out of that band. No one will come up to them and say, you got to sit at this one particular spot to listen to this band. That's the sweet spot. So right away, that's a clue that somehow the traditional methods are not creating a natural sound field, just as if you would experience if you were at a live performance. Because if you have to sit in just one place to experience it, okay, then it's not the same. And that's the second thing that I think more attention should be paid to, okay, is I don't see enough analysis of what really constitutes a natural sound field at a live performance and how to reconstruct all the qualities that says to a human, this is live, this is real, okay? I can hear this band just like when I go to the jazz shop and sit there and listen to them. That's the ultimate goal of a speaker, is that when you're sitting there, if you close your eyes, the speakers disappear, and it's just as if the band is right there in front of you. That's the ultimate compliment a speaker can get, that it disappeared, and the live audience, the live performance is there.
I can definitely say that I experienced that for myself, and that's something that's I can kind of attest that, hey, you have definitely accomplished that. At least the best that I've ever heard it. Lifelike means lifelike, and trust me, this is something people should definitely check out. Which leads me to my next question, which is along the lines of, who are these speakers for? We've been talking about audiophiles all the time, but I'm sure that there's a large segment of the population out there that listens to music and just has never really given this much consideration. I'm sure that you would love everyone possible to buy a pair of your speakers, but who did you really envision is would be interested in these?
To me, the speakers are for everyone that wants to really enjoy their music, to experience their music on a different level, to actually feel their music. People that want to feel their music. Practically, how easy is that to do? Like we said before, they'll buy a set of speakers and then they'll go through different amplifiers and things like that. We're trying to not make that an issue. Okay, that everything's built in and balanced and taken care of you all over to feel that experience once you take it out of the box, put them on the stands and plug them in. So who are they for? They're for people that walk in the room and what they hear is what they fall in love with.
I gotcha.
Whether that be an audiophile, a man on the street who's never really heard high end before, But it's kind of like what Kobe beef is, right? That
It's
exotic.
yeah. There and this is see, now you're talking about food, and that's more my forte. There's Kobe beef from, of course, America, which is derived from cows that were raised in Japan. But of course, the traditional, the ever famous one is from Japan, where they really keep the stress of the cow low. They really pamper, and it creates this very unique, high quality marbling of steak that you really can't find in anything else. Like it's definitely a step in a different direction. Yeah.
Okay, so if your whole life you've experienced hamburgers as McDonald's hamburgers,
Mm-hmm.
and one day somebody handed you a hamburger made out of Kobe beef, and you bite into that, all of a sudden your experience of what a hamburger is has just become much higher.
Yeah.
Okay. But you didn't know it until you experienced something much better. That's what I'm finding with these speakers is when they hear the Rembrandts, maybe they had their favorite speaker before, but all of a sudden they contrast it now, okay? And they say, this is better, and they don't want to go back to the other stuff. So it's for, these are for audiophiles. They're for people that are not professional audiophiles. They're just people that they want to hear good music, or they've never heard music, their favorite music especially, reproduced this good, and once they hear it, that's what they want.
I got you.
I'm just trying to bring that experience to as many people as possible.
So, and actually, speaking of that experience, if I could take just one small step back real quick, when I was listening to it live in person, you had two speakers set up kind of in the middle of the room, and well, of course, up against a wall. It wasn't that intrusive, but you had two speakers set up, and you can buy these things individually. You can buy them in pairs on your site. Do you recommend the dual setup personally, or can people still get a comparable experience with just a single unit?
No, you can't get a comparable experience with just one. It takes the two to get the imaging, as they call the imaging, the sound stage. When you're at a live performance, the drum is over on the right, and the saxophone is on the left, and the singer is somewhere else, and the piano is in another place in the room. And those, what they call time delays of where things are, just gives you a much more natural feeling for the live performance.
So you would recommend
if you close your eyes, the pair, yeah. What you want to do is you want to be able to close your eyes and point to where the individual instruments are, as you're listening to them. That's just part of the experience.
I gotcha. So with these, and hey, you spent so long actually designing these things and working on them. They're officially up for sale. You can get your hands on them. Talk about, and this may be premature, but talk about kind of what's next for you. Is there any more refining of this product? Is there a version 2? Are you going to lock yourself away in seclusion for 10 months now and work on a 10-month speaker? What is next for Rembrandt Labs?
Well, we've just launched this. So really what's next is to tell people that we exist. I arrived at CES, but this is the first time. So the next step for Rembrandt has to be, we know we're unknown. We need to let people experience the Rembrandts, be able to listen to them. People know that these speakers are available. So that's really the thing that we need to focus on next is just expose the fact that the product exists and look at it, try it, see what you think.
And hey, that's why I'm really happy to have you on the show, because being able to try it myself and actually listen to it was something else, and I definitely wanted to showcase you guys on the program, because this is something different, and I can't say that often about audio. Like you said, a lot of speakers out there have not changed their basic design since the 1930s. But this is truly something different. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us your experience, your hard work, your labor, and really, I can tell, over the course of the interview, your passion. You have a true passion for it. So many people come on the show and it's like, hey, I created a really good product. You should come buy it. You have definitely, don't get me wrong, you're a business, but at the same time, you have shown that you put a lot of your own, dare I say, like, dignity into this product. So it shows that, and I'm happy to hear that. And Ray, I'm going to let you have the last word here. Is there anything about this product or anything that we didn't touch on that you think we should before we wrap up the interview?
I just would like the product to stand on the user experience. When someone walks into the room and they really love what they hear, and especially when they play their favorite song, but they hear things in the song they never heard before, that it touches their heart more than it ever has before. That's what I want Rembrandt to stand for, is that whatever I did to make that happen, okay, they don't need to understand it or analyze it, okay? It's just that that connection with this product should be how it makes them feel.
I gotcha. And really, something like this, I know that Brookstone isn't really, in many places, but something like this would be really, helpful to have people, kind of have a showroom, have a place that people could listen to it. But I will say that just coming as the host of Computer America, I have never heard speakers as good as these, and I mean that. We've interviewed a lot of speaker companies on the show, and a lot of them do a very, very good job, and they do it good enough. We've heard tons of technology from magnetic planar technology or planar magnetic technology, to some of just the basics, and these are the best sounding speakers I've ever heard. I can safely say that. So. And hey, like I said, I'm happy that we were able to get you, Ray, and talk about these things with our audience. So everyone, we've been talking to Mr. Ray Imblum. He is the president of Rembrandt Labs, rembrandtaudio.com. We'll have a link over at Computer America. And Ray, thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. And hey, we hope to hear back from you. And if there's any changes, anything new, we'd love to have you back on the show. But hey, I think that we gave the audience a lot of good information. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and have a great one. We're going to wrap up with news, but Ray, we're going to say goodbye, and we're going to do our thing. So until next time, talk to you then.
Talk to you then.
All right, everyone, and there we go. So we're going to go ahead and wrap that up there, and we're going to go ahead and switch over to computer and technology news. But in what little time we have left, that was great. I love that segment so much. High-end audio, like I said, it was never my forte, but after hearing that, there's a difference. It's so many other times I've had companies on the show that say that, oh, there's a difference once you hear it, blah, blah, blah. And, don't get me wrong, it could have been the source file. It could have been their product. It could have been so many different, hey, maybe I just have bad ears. I legitimately heard a difference with these speakers. So I'm happy that, I'm just happy. So let's go ahead and continue on computer and technology news brought to you by Computer America. With our low fidelity jingle. So tons of different stories that we could do. Let's go ahead and talk about this one. This is a pretty interesting take on the capabilities of an iPhone 11. And hey, people need to know about it. Fans have been waiting for this feature since the Apple's mobile launch event. And this is FiLMiC's or FiLMiC's multi-camera video tech comes to iPhone 11. saying that there's a good chance you didn't know that iOS allows apps to record video with multiple cameras at the same time, saying that there's hardly any software out there that does this trick. That's where the team behind the popular iOS FiLMiC Pro comes in. They were the first to show off simultaneous video recording using multiple iPhone cameras, and now they're making that functionality available with the new free app DoubleTake. So if you have an iOS 13 and you have an iPhone 11 or better, hey, check out DoubleTake. It's a free app. They said that the company's press release doesn't make clear when or if this multi-camera recording feature will wind up in the flagship Pro app, but DoubleTake works well enough as a standalone that it's worth installing anyways. This, by the way, coming to us from Engadget. They said that the maximum resolution of your DoubleTake is 1080p thanks to some internal limitations, and if you're using the 10S, 10S Max, or the 10R, you can't use the app to record both of the rear cameras, only one or the other, plus the front-facing camera. So apart from that, the biggest shift in FiLMic's approach here is that the DoubleTake is remarkably easy to use. You can use both. Of course, you can even do picture-in-picture if you want to, so you could film what you're looking at and, of course, a reaction shot to, kind of like the selfie camera, and record things in high fidelity. They said that the app itself lacks many of the fine-grained controls that the Pro app has, but that just means it's easier to pick up and start using. They said that it's a tool for everything from professional broadcast-style news interviews to YouTube capturing multiple angle during live events. But one thing's already clear, content creators just got a fantastically flexible tool at a crazy bargain, crazy being free. So again, if you want a front-facing camera as well as a rear-view facing camera at the same time, I'm surprised that that functionality was not rolled into Apple to begin with. But hey, always down for freebies. Let's next talk about, I think we're going to talk about 5G. I know, I just went on a rant the other day about it and how much I loathe 5G, but this one supports my viewpoint, so I can cover this story very, very easily. This one from Mr. John Brodkin from Ars Technica, and Verizon brings 5G to the Super Bowl, well, kind of, for part of the stadium, saying that the Verizon's 5G hype train is heading to the Super Bowl, but the carrier won't tell us whether its new network will cover all of the seats in the entire stadium. Think about that. They can't guarantee that 5G, this big thing that they're, blowing way out of proportion, in my mind anyways, they can't even guarantee it's going to, stadiums are big, stadiums are huge, but they can't guarantee it's going to cover the entirety of it. They said that, meanwhile, Verizon issued a 5G Super Bowl press release Friday, claiming that 5G is changing everything, and 5G built right has the potential to transform the way fans experience football and other entertainment content. And they said that they spent more than $80 million to enhance its award-winning network to support the Super Bowl this year. $80 million, and they can't guarantee 5G can reach everyone in the stadium. This likely means that 5G networks still can't cover the whole stadium. They said that, they have a quote from Verizon here. Utilizing the extraordinary speed, throughput, and low latency available on its 5G ultra-wideband network, Verizon is working to take sporting experiences to new heights. And they said that the press release didn't say how many of the stadium's 65,000 seats will have 5G access. Last time I heard about a stadium being covered by 5G, they would only cover essentially like the ingress point for the stadium. So people waiting in line, waiting to be seated, that kind of thing. Like at the entrance, people would have 5G, which is, I guess, where they're assuming most people are going to be sitting down and browsing on their phones the most often. And of course, you would have the greatest point of congestion, people getting on the network, getting off the network, that kind of thing. But as for everyone sitting on the seats and trying to record on their phone or stream on their phone or send photos or videos on their phone, not so much. So, of course, there's a whole thing about 5G that we got into the other day. But the point is, even when it's, this is the thing, well, 5G still isn't the thing. So, let's see. Sorry about that. We don't have any time for anything else. Okay, just real quick. we'll cover this and then call it a day because we have like a minute left. Karma Automotive. If you haven't heard of them, well, now you have. Karma Automotive to build electric truck and SUV from Fisker's ashes. And they said that a pickup truck concept will be shown before the year's end. And surprise, it's looking pretty futuristic. Karma Automotive, the automaker previously known as Fisker Automotive, is working on an electric pickup truck and SUV. The company plans to show off a concept version of the pickup, before the end of the year, and they said that it will have a starting price, oh my god, of less than $135,000. Well, and of course the Karma Revero is what they're comparing it to. So the Karma Revero is the sports car. It's $135,000. Think of it like a model. Let's see. The Tesla Roadster would be the closest when that thing was like $100,000 concept car, or sports car. But yeah, so it will come under the $135,000 sports car. Both vehicles will be based around the new all-wheel drive platform that will be built at the automaker's factory in Southern California. So in order for the vehicle to be a success, they said that Karma Automotive will have to prove that it's moved on from the failed Fisker Automotive brand. And, well, hey, the Chinese investors changed the company's name to Karma and rebranded the hybrid sports car Karma as the Revero. So, anyway, with that being said, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe this is some competition. I think that the electric vehicle market does need competition, and maybe this might be it. But it's hard to make a new car. Everyone, we are flat out of time. ComputerAmerica.com, Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern. Everyone, thank you for tuning into the show. I hope that you had a great time and you are ready for more Computer America right around the bend. Everyone, catch you next time. Bye-bye.